right, so we are fresh off the experience of watching the Black Panther.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
The Black Panther has been the protector of Wakanda for generations. Now it is time to show the outside world who we are.
We went to see it as a family, which meant 3 brown sisters.
Plus.
And our Tolkien white guy.
Plus our Tolkien white guy. My partner, Genjo, was in the theater with us. We were all in really relaxing recliner leather seats in this like massive stadium seating situation.
Yes.
In a theater in central Minnesota.
And there were a few other brown people there.
There was lots of laughter at the right time, so that was helpful.
That felt good.
Once we were like snuggled into our situation, I think we all felt like safe enough to have this experience.
Yes.
And it was a motherfucking experience.
It was so wonderful. And so this is, again, a spoilerific show, intentionally so. So we ask you, if you have not seen Black Panther yet, pause. This will be here waiting for you when you come back.
Go see it.
Go see it.
Like, cancel your work plans tomorrow.
Just go see it.
And go see the movie. Lie to whoever you need to lie to about what you're up to. Don't post on social media that you're going to see the film so you can go see the film and then act like you were sick and at the dentist or whatever.
It's such a sick film.
It's such a sick film.
But I'm cheating.
I got so ill. Wakanda forever.
I feel like we should do like a quick just rush through of all the things that were freaking awesome. And then come to, we're sitting with some big questions.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
There's a lot. Yeah, like we can acknowledge at the top, there's a lot that's complicated, beautifully complex about this film.
It's so good.
But yes, let's first go into the parts that we were like...
The parts
that were amazing.
This movie was plick and plop. Okay. So we don't even have words anymore.
So one of the things that I was like in love with about this film was just straight up, as an action film, it was a work of art. So I said this in the car on the way home, that like one of the things that I find really frustrating about watching action films that are American made, especially in the last like 10 years, this has really become more and more the case, that like there's no build up. There's no like moving us in most American made action films now. There's no moving us towards a climactic moment. And Black Panther did this beautiful job of actually building us up, giving us all the clues that some amazing fight scene was coming without blowing its load within the first like 15 minutes on that fight scene.
Yeah.
And so by the time we had that final battle sequence where they're like out on that green space and it's just like, you know, the like, it's like, which it's like Okoye and her like amazing female
I know. I'm like, what are they
warriors.
called?
What are they called? Let's look it up. Oh, this isn't going to tell us. Versus,
I know, I'm going to find out what the
versus Wakabe's, like, his army, and then the Jabari army comes in right at the end and, like, fucks some shit up with their, like, situation.
God.
It was just, like, that was so beautiful. But, like, what was great was that the film, like, queued us up for that moment multiple times over the course of, like, we had smaller little fight sequences along the way. We had the introduction of the rhinoceroses early in the film, but you didn't really know what they were for until suddenly they're, like, busting up, like the whole situation. Warrior rhinoceroses with, like, armor on their
magical
on
armor
their
and
things.
Super strength.
Okay, so that was one thing that I was like, I'm here for this. What were you here for?
So almost everything, like basically, I was like totally geeking out.
The Lady Warriors.
I was like geeking out the entire time. So I loved, the inventions. Shuri and her inventions just rocked my entire world. Like from the first minute we meet her, as she walks through and she's so playful with her brilliance and her genius, and she's just like cracking jokes.
She's like, yeah, I'm a genius. I'm still a lot of fun.
Exactly. I'm just like, your outfits, amazing. The things you've made are amazing and reliable. It's like, oh, you can count on me. You can count on my technology. Like, I will be there when you need. So she rocked my world. And then the actual like setting was so gorgeous. Like it gives you everything that you're like, oh, beautiful African countryside, like what you're expecting. And then it's like, and burst through that. And then here's this multi-dimensional high-tech city that also echoes like what's going on in Africa right now, that I feel like less visible to people, or less, it's like the thing that people are less likely to see or less likely to look at is like, oh, right.
There's
Africa
massive cities in Africa.
And very futuristic. It's all happening
Right.
right now. And I feel like Wakanda provides that.
Yes.
In this incredible way. And then I just feel like the fight sequences were incredible. And every character was incredible. So what you were talking about with like why the fight sequences mattered so much.
Yes.
In part to me, it's because they did the work of letting the characters become something that mattered to us. Like we really cared about why each person was fighting. And I felt like they did a great job of not throwing anyone under the bus ideologically. Like they weren't like, oh, this one, we don't care about him, or they're making a bad decision. Exactly. Like that distinction between villain and antagonist really mattered here.
Yes.
Right?
And what Adrian's referencing there, just for our listeners, is Michael B. Anthony, who plays the primary antagonist of the film, Eric Killmonger. Okay, listeners, this is the first of 2 instances in the episode where I refer to Michael B. Jordan as Michael B. Anthony. Who is Michael B. Anthony, you might ask? We have no idea. Apparently, it's a floral and events company. It has nothing to do with Michael B. Jordan. My apologies for the error. I was very excited when we were recording the episode. He, in an interview this weekend, made the distinction that he's like, I'm not the villain of the story, I'm the antagonist. And it's very much true. Like, he is not, he's doing some problematic things, as you'll see when you watch the movie.
Sure.
But it is true that he's not the baddie. There is no, like, big bad in the film.
Exactly. Like, one of the things that I kept noting to myself is I love that everyone is gains some respect or earns the respect throughout the film, even if they're people who, we're beefing with this person, or they did something that felt like a betrayal, or, the Jabari leader who comes and is like, I'm going to challenge you for this leadership right now because I don't agree with, like, the entire approach and the direction you're taking us towards technology.
Yeah.
But once he loses the challenge, it's like,
he's like,
all right, I'm going to go do my thing. I'm going to respect this process. And then later it's like, yo, let me show up and help you out. Right? I found the name. By the way, so I feel like the name of the armed forces are the Dora Milaje. The Dora Milaje. I think I'm saying that correct. This is Okoye,
the general. So this is her, warrior crew.
Of amazing warrior women. Oh my God,
I want all the breastplates.
But one of the things I want to tell people is, like, Autumn and I are not experts on Black Panther. So you might have picked up on that. We are not at all. I actually was like, it's been one of those things I'm like, I've got to read that. I need to read that. I've got to read that. And then when this started coming, I was like, let me just experience this and see what it's like to experience it. And now it's like, this is what I'm going to be reading for the rest of my life.
Yes.
So
I will say that I did watch the Black Panther cartoon, which was on for just one season. I think that was 2010 that cartoon was out.
You told me to watch it.
And it's fantastic. I highly recommend that people go back and watch the Black Panther cartoon. But we're not showing up in here as like super experts, but you know what? We're never showing up in here as super experts, and
exactly,
we're totally okay with that.
Exactly.
I definitely felt like, say the name again of the warriors?
Dora Milaje.
Dora Milaje. I was here for like everything about that. I was here for everything about Okoye, like the fight scene in the casino situation in Korea, where she's like jumping, like every time she's jumping with her amazing red gown, like flying, like it's like the red gown is like its own character in the film. Do you know what I'm saying?
Well, I'm here for everything about her, and I thought it was such a complex, like, to me, she also got read the hardest in some ways. Like, she's like such a badass, and then when it comes time to say, wait, this guy's actually not okay. Like, he's coming into leadership, and he stepped in through the path, the challenge path that
the
we
ritual
talk
combat.
About. Mm-hmm. But he's not a good guy. We don't know who he is, where he's come from, and like he stepped into leadership, which I think is, to me, one of the main ways that the film reads the current American context, the current U.S. context, right? Which is like, just
there's an imposter.
Someone seems to win the election or whatever happens to be your ritual combat process. Just because someone seems to win that doesn't mean you all stand there and you're like, well, I'm loyal no matter what. And so I felt like that moment of her being like, I can't do this. I can't jump off and be part of the rebellion or resistance with you. That was a moment of like, oh, that's intense. Because I'm like, I'm trusting you. But then she totally makes a comeback because then her husband is the, guy who's betrayed his best friend, basically.
He becomes like Killmonger's like side boy.
Homie, which I was just
and
like,
it's just like,
dude,
what's going on? All
out.
of you are wrong.
You're
Get
still
out.
in the sunken place.
Get out.
Exactly. And we say that because he's played by the actor who played the lead in Get Out, which
Daniel Kaluuya, right?
Exactly. So, but that's also Okoye's love. And so there's this moment, this beautiful moment where he's like, wait, you would choose Wakanda over me, basically? And she's like, yeah, with no hesitation. And that to me was also, like, that was just like, whew.
Yeah.
Like, what?
And that forces him to his knees.
Exactly. And that to me was like one of the most exciting questions that I felt like was asked throughout the entire film over and over and over again, which is, what are you loyal to? And how do you know? Right? Like, are you loyal to family? Are you loyal to your love? Are you loyal to a nation? Are you loyal to Black people? Are you loyal to the species?
And I think underneath that question is like, so what are you loyal to, and what does the thing that you're loyal to represent to you, right?
Yes.
Because any of those things in that list, like family, nation, Black people, like it functions as a it functions as a symbol of something else, like a symbol, an ideological symbol, right?
Exactly.
And you see our main character, T'Challa, the Black Panther, as he's assuming leadership right in the wake of his father's assassination.
Yeah.
You see him really struggling with that himself, that what it's going to mean for him to be an effective king has a lot to do with where he throws his loyalty in terms, and what that means to him to say. And, ultimately, I think my sense is that, like, the sort of messaging around where the film lands is that he ultimately lands in this place where he's going to straddle tradition and quote unquote progress, a future that's rooted in technology. And it's interesting that's like, that those two things are kind of positioned in conflict with each other in the film, because the whole story of Wakanda is that Wakanda forever has basically straddled that place of tradition, integrating tradition and technology. And so it's interesting where it's like, okay, so what's the actual conflict here? In Wakanda, the conflict is not between technology and tradition. That's not the actual conflict. That's like the conflict that's happening in the outside world is between those two things.
Or it is present in Wakanda, but it's been controlled. So it's like present between the Jabari and all the other tribes, right?
Right.
So it's like the Jabari represent that body that's like, technology is actually not our friend.
They're like the Amish of Wakanda.
Well, it's so interesting because I read them inside of like the Hotep community, but you know what I'm saying? Like, I was just sort of like, oh no, like, don't go that path. Don't get down necessarily with all that technology. Like, we already have ancient ancestral technologies. We don't need to like fuck with that stuff, right? And I was like, I thought they did that with like a lot of respect for here's how y'all are living and here's what you're doing, and like, it's really a key role, right? But then I was like, so that's playing out internally, but then externally, I totally thought it was like us versus everybody. It's like that sense of what is abundance. Like, do we have enough? Like, we have enough to take care of ourselves and to survive, and like, we have to survive forever and ever, and we can't trust the entire rest of the world, right? Like, there's such a sense of like, why would we trust them? We can't trust them. They're not trustworthy. And I feel like it leads to some of the most amazing lines that I'm like, I don't think I'll ever forget that. Like, and this speaks to the role that white people play in the movie overall, right? It's like, they are not a central part of this movie at all. They're not the villain. It's not like the main thing we're fighting against is a white guy. And they're not coming in to save us at the last minute. Like, they're supportive. They're funny. Like, we get to make fun of them.
They're the comic relief.
They are comic relief. And like, my favorite line is Shuri saying that to Bilbo Baggins, which I'm like,
Martin Freeman.
Martin Freeman, thank you.
Whose character's name is we don't know, but we'll call him Bilbo for now.
But she says to, like, he walks up on her, startles her, whatever. She's like, "Don't scare me, colonizer." It's just like,
such a good line.
Snap. Like, is that a T-shirt? Like, what? How can I incorporate that into my daily life? But just naming things as they are. But it's like,
and then the other amazing line where when he goes to speak in front of the leader of the Jabaris,
they're like,
and he goes, "You do not speak." And I was like, on my way out of the theater, I was like, okay, I'm using that forever every time some white person tries to like spit some bullshit at me.
Yeah, just
I'm just
white
gonna be like,
explain things. I'm just like, no, you don't get to
You
white
do not
explain
speak.
to me. I mean, it was just, in that way, a powerful experience of like, oh, this truly is a utopian thing, or like something we've never seen. It's like, oh, what does it look like for a body of people to develop outside the context of white people,
right,
white colonization? And so much so that there was a huge absence of light-skinned Black people in the movie. Like, there were no central characters that were light-skinned Black people. There were a few warriors that were light-skinned, and I like noted them because I was like, okay,
yeah,
everyone's not gone. But then it was like also really fascinating because it's like, yeah, this is what
where would that
looks
light-skinned
like.
person come from?
Where exactly, right? It's like, if you're not interacting with white people,
Right.
where does it come from? Although I think there are some really interesting questions around, like, there's a lot of Ethiopian folks who are really light skinned. There's a lot of Eritrean folks who are light skinned. There's a lot of folks on the continent who are lighter skinned, but I think historically that traces back to some interactions. And I think there's a lot of mystery still about, like, and mystery, some of it intentional. Like, we don't want to necessarily know all those stories, but there's a lot there. And in this story, I love that they stick with, we have dark-skinned warriors, we have dark-skinned leaders, we have dark-skinned everybody. It's all gorgeous. Like, drink in this dark-skinned gorgeousness and power and contend with it.
Yeah. It was really interesting thinking about this idea of Wakanda really developing outside of colonization, outside of whiteness, and then its relationship then to like what colonization has wrought in the world and what whiteness has wrought in the world as being like one of the essential, or one of the sort of meta conflicts of the film. And then thinking about, I was thinking about this in relationship to the way the film really lifts up the question of like, what is the responsibility of those who, what is essentially like, what is the responsibility of Africans for the suffering of Black people? Like, what is the responsibility of those who were not displaced through enslavement or other aspects of diaspora for the suffering that has happened to people who have been enslaved in other parts of the world? And one of the interesting things that, it feels like one of the interesting things that the Eric Killmonger character and his father, the uncle, that's Njobo, are sort of, the argument that they're making is that by Wakanda, by choosing to isolate itself for all this time, didn't have the opportunity to shape the progress of the global progress, right? And the argument that they're now making to like the current leadership of Wakanda is that we have a responsibility to shape what is happening globally. Exactly. And to me, that feels like a really interesting question against the backdrop of, what's actually happening, outside of the fictional Marvel universe, like what's actually happening in our world right now. This question I feel like that we're sort of constantly confronted with of whose responsibility is it actually to fix the problem?
Yeah, and I feel like this, one of the things I love about science fiction and fantasy is that you can step outside of the way that history has played out, which has been Africa. There's not been a nation in Africa that has been really able to be safe from colonization. Right. There's not some place that has been like, oh, like y'all went off and had to be slaves and we were just here chilling and accumulating resources and being wealthy and like being unperturbed by the outside world. It's like everyone has had to wrestle with, battle with, and be in their own battles with either direct colonization or other forms of internalized colonization that have come from interacting with culture. And for those that haven't taken those technological leaps, even if there are utopian qualities to the places, there's still this sense of being left behind or being left in a different time. And so it's like, oh, what if that gets flipped on its head? It's actually, there is some abundance or there is something to draw from. But for me, there was also like this heartbreak. So it's both like, what is the responsibility? And then what is the relationship that exists between those of us who made it and those of us who became, or our ancestors were enslaved people. And then those of us who had never had an ancestor that was enslaved, or the narrative that we have is we don't have ancestors that are enslaved. Yeah. They were part of the same diaspora. And I think it was, for me, that question, or that thing that the Eric Killmonger character says at the end, bury me in the ocean with my ancestors who knew death, was better than being
In bondage.
And I felt such, I'm like, oh, there is so much shame inside of saying that, you know, that, oh, all these people whose ancestors chose, like, I will survive bondage, like, I will stay alive in bondage. And like, for me, I've just been like, oh, you know, it's been a work of my life to be like, I see the power in that choice.
And
I see
choosing
the beauty
to survive
in
that.
choosing to survive and saying like, no, we actually don't know if everyone, like, we don't know if anyone's going to be left on the continent, right? We don't know if all of the continent is going to be stolen, taken, or killed in this way. Like, for me, it's always been the thing of like, we don't know enough to make that choice of just like, I will personally jump off, even though that's also a brave choice, is being like, I will not, you know, like, to me, I'm like, I found respect for all of the different choices that people made to move through that place, or most of the choices.
It took all of those choices being made for us to be in this moment.
For us to be here. But then I think that part of what he problematizes there is like, is it worth it for us to be here? Like, the life that I had to live, was it worth it for me to go through all that suffering? Like, you don't know what it's like to have gone through that, you know, like, to have grown up in Oakland, to have grown up without my father, to have grown up in that suffering, in that environment.
Well, and it's so interesting. So Genjo, my partner, was really pointing out like the psychology of their, you know, the Eric Killmonger character and the T'Challa characters. They both take these trips into the beyond world, to meet with their ancestors, their fathers, and that, you know, that T'Challa, both times that he makes that trip, you know, he finds his father in this beautiful ancestral plane, surrounded by other ancestors. And when Eric's character makes that trip, he's back in that apartment where he held his father's dead body. And that's where his father is too. Like, they're both trapped in that place. And it is interesting that question that is being posed by his character of like, is it, you know, like, and in some way, it's like the question that's being posed by the movie is like, do you really see the harm? Can you really see and understand the actual level of harm that's happening here? Can you sit with that harm and then continue to choose to not intervene and to not to make a decision? We're going to shape this in a different direction. You know,
that, and like the intergenerational work that they do of like saying, I'm going to look at you and be like, I love you. I do love you enough to actually cry in front of you. I love you enough to come back and find you here. I mean, because both of them, inside a different resistance, are in tears in front of their fathers, asking them to account for the decisions that they made. It feels like one of those things where I'm like, oh, I don't think we see enough. You know, it's like, I think so many action films are actually structured trying to do that in some way, like, and not pulling it off, right? I'm like, because you haven't built up enough of the storyline to make that a legitimate exchange and a legitimate question. And this, I feel like they do it not once, but twice with two different characters where you're like, oh, like, what decisions did you make that left us like this? And how do I, in my short lifetime, make some other decision that starts to move us in a different direction and a more holistic direction? And who knows if it's the right direction or not, right? But there's a sense of right and wrong in there that goes across, that spans across time. And I think there's so much healing, not inside of going back and being like, we can make this right between us across generations, but rather going back and being like, I love you and I reject something that your generation was moving towards. Right? And I love you, and for our people, for our Wakanda, and for our larger vision, I'm going to reject that. I'm going to move in a different direction.
And this is the beauty of the absence of like a central white character in the film, right? That like, because all of the most important conflicts in the film are happening within and among Black people, it means that like, not only are we just getting to like bask in the beauty of that and the fact that like white folks are just totally tertiary to the storyline, but like we're also getting to be in, there's many, many layers of complexity now to the conflicts that are happening amongst these characters, and we get to be in all of that without it, because, you know, there's no easy villain. There's no like, and there's no easy resolution to be had. You watch the characters basically say, with the information I have, I'm going to make the only choice that feels available to me right now.
Exactly. And I think that there's like, you know, so now I feel like, you know, the gush continues, because to me, even having these problems or the complexities that I have with the movie are part of, like, I'm like, I feel like we've been given such a good movie that there's just, like, stuff to contend with and stuff to argue around.
Yeah.
But, like, I'm just like, oh, and then you see some of the complexities that I see showing up in our Black movement work right now, which is you have a character like Eric Killmonger show up who is, there's a lot of truth in what he's saying. There's a lot of accurate analysis, right? That's just like, hold on. It is so unfair that y'all are over here generating all these resources that could liberate all of our people, and you're just holding on to them. And I love that that the truth there is considered so valuable that even though the way he's bringing it is wrong, they actually learn from the truth and figure out a way to apply it.
Yeah.
But then examining his character, because he's very compelling. Like, he's a very compelling antagonist. Like, you can't take your eyes off him. And it's not just because he's fine as fuck.
I literally couldn't take my eyes off him. Every time he walked on screen, I was like, is there anyone else in the movie now?
I think you were also groaning. But I think that there's, which is great, because I was like, your boo is there. It's just like, this is the future. But
I was groaning and holding his hand.
Yeah. It's fascinating. So, I mean, one of the things that I think is deep about him and his character is he comes in with this, like, accurate analysis, tons of hurt, right? And, like, so much
literally
hurt,
wearing it on his body.
literally wearing it all over his body. So much hurt that he has caused, and so much hurt that he has borne, and so much hurt that he cannot actually fulfill a transformation. Like, when he is offered, like, do you want to heal? It's possible. We could heal you. Like, we have that capacity.
Yeah.
That he rejects it. And that he comes in with no base, right? Like, it's not like he has built a movement of people that are, like, having his back and at his side. And so it's like,
he's just out here on his own.
Exactly.
With his girlfriend that he
on
kills.
His own. I know. I was like, wait, you killed
you just
your
offed her.
girlfriend. You just, like, took this elder woman up by the neck. You burned all the, like, most valuable resource. Like, you are making a mess out here and just destroying the shit out of everything. And that doesn't mean you don't have a point, but we can't let you continue, right?
And it's like he has an accurate analysis, but he doesn't believe that he deserves love.
Exactly.
And so he can't act in a
the
loving
gift of Wakanda.
way. Exactly.
He can't receive the gift of Wakanda. And I'm just like, he deserves the gift of Wakanda. And like the fact that they construct this story such that you get to that place with him, where even though you've seen him do all this harmful behavior, hurt women, kill all these people, steal shit from Wakanda, burn all this stuff down, there's still, for me at least, I felt a moment where they're sitting there looking at the sunrise, and I'm like, yes, heal him.
Heal him.
Heal him.
Let him be your brother.
Exactly. Yes. And fundamentally, I just felt so emotional about that, because I'm like, this
and
is how I feel. I
too.
know. I'm just like, this is how I feel. This is like the depth of my love for Black people right now. Is I'm just like, yes, y'all motherfuckers are messy. We are all being messy. We're trying so hard to get free, and we don't know how. None of us know how. And there's so many different kinds of messes. But it reminds me of that Tony K. Bambara line in The Salt Eaters, like, do you want to be well, right? Like, do we want to be well? Are we ready for it? And I just feel like this movie pulls that in, right? It's like, oh, you have to want to be well, because if you do, we know how to heal. Like, and, you know, technology and the many ways of use of technology. It's like, there's technology that's cool, machines, but there's also the technology of love and loyalty that moves between all of them. It's just sort of like these rituals by which we travel to other planes, the rituals by which we transition leadership, the rituals, because, well, I'll just say one thing on that too, that I love. So even though we're talking about kings and queens and like stuff that generally I'm like, I'm anti-monarchy, you're anti-monarchy in general, we're not down for it. And I like the idea.
Although, like, Chadwick Boseman, by the end of the movie, I was like, Chadwick Boseman for president. Like,
I was like, can
put on that cape
go
thing
challenge Donald
and just, like, be our president. But go ahead.
Well, I mean, but part of it was that I was like, oh, I like that you have to fight for it, and you have to fight for it without the superpowers. So I love that it was like, you have to actually get stripped of the power of the Black Panther. Like, I like that it was something that could come on and come off. That was like, the part of you that could become the leader, you had to do that without all the you know, magic in your system, and just be like, do you have the will, do you have the strength, do you have the skill to do this role? If you do, then we will infuse you with what we give to a leader here. but you don't just automatically have that. And I thought that
That's the sound of me snapping. I'm so excited about it.
Exactly. I was like, ooh, how do we do that?
Well, and I do love that even in the midst of all the technology, and yes, like Shuri uses technology to like heal Bilbo Baggins' spine, but like the ancient technology that actually heals Chadwick Boseman in his like moment of almost death where he's in a coma in the ice is that herbal flower. You know what I mean? And I love that it's like, oh, herbs.
Exactly.
Herbs is what heals him.
Herbs is what heals him. And snow.
Herbs and snow.
Herbs and snow.
You know, I live in Minnesota. I believe in the healing power of snow.
We literally are out here healing with some herbs and snow like right now.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think at risk of opening up the things that do feel, you know, complicated.
I think we should get there.
I think let's just go all the way there. And, you know, one of the things that Adrian and I were doing in the lead up, the last couple of days leading up to seeing this movie,
saying Wakanda forever all the time.
Saying Wakanda forever all the time, ensuring that everyone that we were connected to on social media knew that we had not yet seen the film and needed to like stay away from us with all of the spoilers. But one of the things that we were also avoiding was all the think pieces. And it takes work because, you know, think pieces now come along with like pretty seriously like clickbait titles that are like, you know, why Black Panther is the movie none of us deserve and all this stuff. You know, and it's just like that was an actual title really of a think piece that I've like, all right, I'll go back and look at that at some point. But
my entire saved items on all of my social media is basically Black Panther. So like sometime tomorrow I'll just be like immersed in all that.
Yeah, but you know, so one of the things that I was coming out of the movie with was thinking about like, okay, what are the things that I think could really be read as like legitimate critiques of this film? And one of the things that I was thinking about was the potential critique, or what I imagine is like truly a critique of the film as being a very grandiose version of the like magical Negro trope in American literature. This idea of like an all powerful magical being version of Black people who, you know, if activated in the right circumstances at the right moment, can save. In this case, you know, in the case of the Black Panther and the Marvel Universe, can save like humanity from itself. In most of American literature, the way that trope functions is like can save white people or save a white person from, you know, almost certain death. And I, you know, and I can really imagine that as like a even though the film is an entirely Black and African cast, even though it's an African American writer, even though like all the ways in which Blackness is centralized in the film, it's still against this backdrop of like a world in trouble, and the reason why the world is in trouble is because of colonization. And are Black people, are the Wakandans going to make their technology and magic available to colonizers who've like fucked up the whole planet? Are they going to rescue white people from themselves? Which, you know, and to me, this connects back to that question that I think is an actual question that's raised by the film, which is like, do we believe that we actually are all one people? And if so, what is our responsibility to heal the suffering of the world, even if we didn't cause it?
Yes.
Even if we didn't cause it, what is our responsibility to healing the world? And can we like move beyond these tropes? To a place of like a true sense of mutual accountability to one another, you know? So I'm kind of sitting with the reality that I know that critique is there, and I think it's legitimate because, you know, I'm aware of Black Panther as something that's arising from an American white created, you know, comic universe. And I think that the movie does a really effective job of like problematizing that trope and being like, okay, you know, what about this? How about this way?
Yeah. Well, and I think in a very specific way. So like you know, this magical Negro trope, I'm like every, you know, I'm like, oh, what is the magical Negro trope? And like, I think that the piece in it where I'm like, no, is that in so many times where you see the magical Negro trope, it's like the Negro doesn't care about themselves. It's like they put the white person before themselves. They put the needs of white people before themselves. And so what I feel like is so powerful about this movie is that that's the argument, is people are being like, we're not going to put white people above ourselves. Like, we've been putting ourselves center and our survival center for so long. And now we're being asked to make sure that other Black people, like that the rest of the diaspora, can access those things. And then that's when the UN part at the very end is a little confusing, because I'm like, wait, are we giving this to the diaspore? Or are we just giving this to every old body?
Are we giving this to the CIA?
Exactly. And then, like, having the CIA play a central role in it. The whole thing was just sort of like, who are we loyal to? Who are we riding with?
And who are we in relationship with?
Right? And how do we start to say, is it all? Like, do we have an abundance of resources and an abundance of access on this planet for everyone? Or do we not? Right? Do we fundamentally believe that, or do we not? I think another question side of this is just a believability question of, like, if vibranium lands in this place, knowing how colonization has worked, right? I'm like, I had a hard time believing that they would actually be able to keep it safe, right? Like, I'm like, they're flying towards it. I know there's sort of a jungle cover over it, but I think people would eventually be like, I see where that airplane keeps flying into the jungle cover, and I'm going to figure this stuff out.
But the airplane can make itself invisible.
All of that, right? I was like, I'm sure that Shuri is on it.
Like, Adrian, willing suspension of disbelief.
I know, right? But this is where I'm like, oh, my questions. I was like, I mean, it comes from a place of, like, I want to make sure it's safe. Like, if it's actually out there, I just want to make sure it's for real safe. And that, like, everyone is taking the batteries out of their cell phones when they're crossing the boundary or whatever it is, right? But I also think it raises this interest. I mean, like, fundamentally, it's another way of talking about borders, right? Is like,
yes.
There's some people who think that the U.S. is Wakanda, right? They think that, like, everyone wants to come here and cross our borders and get into this place, and this is the most valuable place. And so...
there is that amazing moment, the conversation between T'Challa and his bestie, Wakabe, where Wakabe's like, well, if you let the refugees in, you let their problems in with them.
Exactly.
And it's just like
exactly,
like,
right? It's
crawling all over my skin, listening to those characters have that conversation.
And it reminds me that all these things, slavery, all these things predate whiteness, right? They're not tied to any particular culture. This is where Octavia Butler, as always, is, like, so brilliant, because she talks about that, like, the primary problem, the fatal flaw of humanity is a combination of hierarchy and intelligence, and that we always come back to it, that we always find ways to be like, we are at the top of the hierarchy. Like, we need to be at the top of the hierarchy, and that's the safest place. And we got to use our intelligence to defend our position at the top of the hill, right? Whatever that is. And I just thought, but I was like, we deserve to have the space to have these debates. Like, I want to see lots and lots of Black people in healthy debates around this stuff, because this is happening in our communities. Like, there are Black people who are anti-immigrant, even though there's a million Black immigrants. There are Black people who are pro-wall and pro-borders, and, like, we got to protect our jobs, and, like, all this, what I think of as very conservative thought processes that hurt my heart, because I'm like, all of that stuff gets used against us. How could you side with it? And yet it's live, it's happening,
we are represented across the political spectrum.
We are, and ignoring it doesn't get us any freer, right?
And I'm glad you brought up the piece around, like, toxic hierarchy, because I think that this is another, one of the complicated aspects of the film is that, like, and I think that this is, like, a very typical thing that's complicated about American films is sort of the uncomplicated presentation of hierarchy and wealth as, like, a, you know what I mean? That there's, like, it's uncomplicated that there's a royal line. There's a ritual combat and blah 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 and all those things, but, like, there's a momentum to T'Challa coming into leadership as the next king because he's the prince, and that's like that's uncomplicated. It's uncomplicated how much wealth they have access to.
Exactly.
And even though there is and there is this interesting presentation of, like, there is a culture of farming, of animal husbandry, of like, of, like, a culture of people being in open air markets and stuff like that. And then there's also these, like, massive buildings where
hyper technology
and, like, who has access to which parts of those parts of society. That's presented in a really uncomplicated way that doesn't feel. That's the part for me that didn't feel believable. Right?
Totally. And I felt like this is all inside still like a super gush. Like I'm really like so satisfied with this film.
Fucking awesome.
And so excited to be like, give me 18,000 sequels.
Yeah, I was like, Okoye needs her own sequel. Like, I just need a whole sequel on her.
And her and Wakabe's relationship, because honey, you know there's going to be trouble at home on those waters.
And in fact, I feel like there's a whole interesting thing in the comic version with her character and sexuality stuff. Although I might be misremembering which character that is.
Yeah, Okoye, I feel like her needs her whole own thing. And then I'm really interested in what they're going to do with Nakia. Because it's like, I love that Nakia, like the love affair that was like, oh, they've had a love affair.
They're
clearly
exes
something
now.
about power dynamics played into it. Mm-hmm. She's like, I'm down to show up for you because your dad just died. And like, you know, but I'm not down to like come and like leave my life and be your wife. I've got a calling. And I love that the only way she's willing to interact with him in any romantic way is once he says, I know you have that calling and I'm going to support that calling. Like I'm going to make sure that that is a part of whatever's happening here.
Yes.
No matter what it means, no matter what it takes to
even if it means
that.
we're going to be long distance.
Exactly, right? I'm just like, that's super powerful.
I respect that.
I respected that too. So I'm like, that's another storyline that could go off. I would love to hear, I would love to actually see a little storyline of what happened between when Eric Killmonger found his dad and when we first see him in the movie, right?
Yes.
Because I'm like, actually, like, what was his? We get told about
Can
that
we
life,
get
but
Michael
I'm like,
B. Anthony his whole own movie?
just give him more, you know, because I'd like to see a little more, you know,
more of him without,
and then there was
with the vest on and without the vest on.
And then I was reading that there was supposed to be a lesbian love affair, and that there is one in the comics between two of the warriors, and so that was something that I felt like, you know, I want to do a little reading and just see if I can find out why that wasn't included in the film, because it feels like they did such excellent work around gender and how people were like, gender did not seem to be a deciding factor in the kind of work or roles that people were holding, or if anything, it was held as like a oppositional thing. It was like women are warriors in a lot of these spaces.
Exactly.
So I'm like, well, why wouldn't you have this lesbian love affair, like with all these
Where's
sexy
the lesbians?
bald-headed ladies? So that felt like something I was longing for. It could have
the last thing I'll say about the thing that has been so immensely satisfying about this film, I'm flipping through the comic right now looking for the lesbians.
Yes, you're looking for lesbians. Where's
the lesbians? Is the soundtrack.
Oh. Yes. Okay. So they
I
dropped
am
the
here
soundtrack
for
last
Kendrick
week.
Lamar, SZA, The Weeknd. Who else? Everybody's on the
Georgia.
Everybody's on the soundtrack.
It is, but I love that it's all these up and coming artists. Like, you know, Kendrick's pretty established, but mostly other folks. It's not like they put like Beyonce, Rihanna, Jay-Z. You know, it was like, we're going to give you a very black soundtrack, and it's going to be a lot of folks just like the actors in this film who are up and coming. You may have seen them here and there, but like, now they're claiming their spot in history, claiming their spot as shapers of the cool, which I just felt like, and it was so brilliant to drop it a week before so that we were just listening to it. So then something felt like a puzzle piece landing in place when you're watching the film and the different sounds start coming in. You're like, that's a song by The Weeknd.
That goes with that part of the movie.
And then it ends with the perfect song, which is All the Stars Are Closer. And it's just like,
all the stars are closer. All the stars are closer.
It's so good.
Yes.
So good. And just generally, like, having a film where all the characters get to be so complex and they don't have to compromise on their complexity for the film to continue. Like, it felt like there was very little simplifying people. It was like, here's black complexity and black excellence, deal with it.
And the acting is just so... Like, we were just talking in the car on the way home about, like, the ways in which both Chadwick Boseman and Daniel Kaluuya are so understated and, like, complex in the way they deliver their performances. And, it's just so joyous to see, again, against this backdrop of, like, 80 years of, like, of African Americans having to perform blackness in like the biggest possible way, and always having to be like caricatures of themselves, to watch these like incredible actors be able to just like get to just be acting.
Exactly.
You know,
just get to be acting, and like, I just
as something to differentiate from performing blackness is really powerful to see.
I want to say thank you, Ryan Coogler. I want to say thank you to all the Black people who went out to see this and everyone else who went out to see this to break all the records for this opening weekend, because it means we're going to get a lot more.
Thank you, Ta-Nehisi
for
Coates.
all of it. And Roxanne Gay and all the folks who have been carrying the legacy forward all this time.
Thank you.
We love y'all.
I want to see more Chadwick Boseman in an outfit. Also.
I'll make sure you get that.
Okay.
Love y'all.
Love y'all.
Spoilerific.
Gushing